Hey guys, tonight we drift into the salt-sprayed, wind-whipped world of piracy, but not the glorified Hollywood version you might imagine. You probably won't survive this journey if you're only expecting swashbuckling duels and treasure chests sparkling under the sun. No, we're diving into the story of women who dared to sail beyond society's expectations. Female pirates who challenged centuries of rigid rules and social norms, often with nothing but a cutlass and sheer audacity. You wander through the rolling waves with them, feeling the ship tilt under your weight, salt stinging your eyes, the ocean's horizon endlessly teasing both freedom and doom. These women's lives were a precarious dance on the knife edge of liberty. Unlike their male counterparts, they weren't just risking wealth or life. They were defying entire societal structures designed to keep them on land, tucked into domesticity. Some disguised themselves as men, hiding in plain sight to gain a share of the loot and the adventure. Others commanded ships openly, their audacity earning fearsome reputations among sailors and merchants alike. And yet, history treats them like whispers, almost as if acknowledging their stories challenges long-held beliefs about gender and power at sea. Scholars still argue whether their audacity was exceptional or merely a reflection of broader, often overlooked trends of female autonomy in maritime communities. The daily life aboard a pirate ship wasn't all daring sword fights and rum-soaked revelries. You feel the creaking timbers underfoot, smell the mingling scent of salt, tar, and unwashed bodies, and hear the endless flapping of sails above. Tasks were grueling, whether hauling heavy ropes in the middle of a storm or keeping watch for approaching naval vessels. And here's a cheeky little detail you probably won't see in your average pirate movie. Some women, despite their fearsome reputations, would secretly sew or mend the crew's clothes, a subtle assertion of influence and care amidst chaos. Imagine balancing a musket in one hand and a needle in the other, while the ship rocks violently. This was their reality. The lure of freedom pulled them toward piracy, but freedom came at a cost. Female pirates challenged norms in a society where maritime laws, social codes, and local customs weren't designed to protect them. They were designed to control them. The decision to take to the sea was an embrace of risk that few men fully understood, and perhaps fewer women survived. Yet the ocean promised a strange form of equality. On deck, skill and courage mattered more than gender. This precarious equality also drew the eyes of historians and storytellers, who sometimes exaggerated feats, romanticized rebellions, or reduced these women to archetypes, virgins, villains, or vengeful sirens. You wander further into their world and notice the stark tension between legend and fact. Popular culture loves to paint these women as fearless adventurers, swinging from ropes and shouting orders while cannons roar. But the truth was often quieter, harsher, and more bureaucratic. Survival demanded cunning, alliances, and sometimes ruthless pragmatism. Ships were microcosms of the wider world, where hierarchies existed but could be disrupted by a single daring act. One rogue maneuver, one clever ruse, and a female pirate could command respect or provoke lethal envy. And here's a bit of quirky history. Some women reportedly carried small trinkets or charms for luck, hidden in their clothing or sewn into the rigging, believing these talismans would protect them in battle or from capture. Whether superstition or strategy, it humanizes them in a way the dramatic myths rarely capture. You imagine yourself reaching into a hidden pocket, fingers brushing against a tiny rabbit's foot or carved bone, a ritual that might have meant the difference between life and death. Scholars still argue whether these practices were widespread or isolated eccentricities, but the tension between belief and skill is fascinating. You can almost hear the whisper of uncertainty carried by the ocean wind. Before we ease fully into the story, a little cheeky reminder. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment telling me your location and local time. It adds this wonderful personal connection to our journey tonight. You already feel the night air brushing your skin, the anticipation of waves breaking against the hull, and maybe even a little thrill knowing we're stepping where few dare. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You imagine standing at the bow, eyes scanning for distant sails or storm clouds, feeling the rope bite into your palms as you steady yourself. You sense the risk, the adrenaline, the whispers of legend circling among the crew. These women, daring beyond their time, took steps that society tried to prevent, and each step carried the possibility of survival or capture. As the ship cuts through the water, the horizon stretches endlessly, and you feel the fragile balance between myth and reality. It's easy to romanticize freedom, but these pirates knew it was paid in sweat, blood, and often the ultimate price. Yet here in this moment, on deck, feeling the wind and listening to the waves, you begin to understand why the call of the sea was irresistible, especially for those who had nothing left to lose. You glance around and imagine fellow crew members, some suspicious, some loyal, some silently judging. The dynamic is complex. Gender was just one layer. Hierarchy, skill, courage, and sometimes luck played larger roles in immediate survival. Still, being a woman added both invisible obstacles and unexpected advantages. A well-timed disguise or daring bluff could tip a battle in one's favor. Scholars still debate whether female pirates were outliers or the vanguard of hidden maritime agency. And as you breathe in the salty air, you realize history didn't just record them, it whispered about them, leaving gaps for us to fill, gaps you'll navigate as we move forward. Tonight, you're stepping into those whispers, feeling the creak of boards beneath your feet, hearing the gulls overhead, tasting the brine on your lips. You sense the excitement, the fear, and the audacity that drove these women to live beyond the rules. And you know somewhere deep in the dark, waiting in the next section, the law, the courts, and the gallows await, because the story of female pirates is as much about survival as it is about defiance. You feel the pull of the open sea like a whisper at the edge of your mind, tempting you beyond the boundaries of land, law, and expectation. For female pirates, the lure of freedom wasn't just about gold or adventure. It was about claiming a space in a world that rarely allowed them one. You wander through crowded ports, smelling the smoke from taverns and the salt from the docks, imagining the choices these women faced. Society had boxed them in, marriage, servitude, or obscurity. But the horizon promised something radically different: autonomy, authority, and a voice that could command attention. Some women were born into circumstance, others found themselves thrust into it, yet all shared a hunger for self-determination. Life on shore offered comfort, but also confinement. You sense it, the whispered rules, the expected decorum, the subtle policing of what women could wear, say, or even dream. You might picture a young woman, restless and daring, listening to the laughter and curses of sailors on the pier, her mind spinning with impossible plans. She would see men setting sail with the wind in their favor and think, why can't I be out there too? Scholars still argue whether the attraction was purely rebellion or a complex cocktail of social, economic, and personal motivations. Perhaps it was both. And you feel the tension. Freedom always comes with risk, and the sea offered both in spades. Imagine stepping onto a ship for the first time. The timbers groan underfoot, ropes coil like snakes around your fingers, and the smell of tar and sweat clings to everything. You feel your heart racing, not just because of excitement, but because everyone aboard is sizing you up. Male pirates were suspicious by nature. Their lives depended on trust, yet their world was filled with deception. And here you are, a woman seeking a place in this ecosystem. Some disguise themselves as men, cutting their hair short and adopting masculine clothing. The audacity of the disguise, you realize, was matched only by the courage it took to live it day after day. And here's a quirky detail you might not expect. Some women carried personal letters, sewn secretly into the lining of their coats, written to lovers or family, reminders of their past lives. You imagine unfolding one during a rare moment of calm, reading the faded ink as the ship rocks beneath you. These letters weren't just sentimental, they were proof that even in rebellion, the human need for connection endured. Scholars still debate whether such gestures were common or exceptional, but the intersection of intimacy and defiance is compelling. You can almost hear the faint whisper of parchment as waves slap against the hull, a secret rhythm shared between women and the world they temporarily left behind. The lure of freedom also meant embracing danger in every form. Naval patrols, rival pirates, storms, disease, these were constants. And yet you feel how some women thrived in it. They were strategic, clever, and audacious, learning navigation, weaponry, and ship maintenance, skills society denied them on land. The ocean became a classroom where courage and cunning were rewarded, and mistakes could be fatal. You imagine yourself at the helm, hands gripping the wheel, mind calculating every wind shift and enemy approach. The thrill is intoxicating but edged with fear. You can almost taste the salt on your lips and feel the sting of sunburn across your shoulders. Some female pirates weren't rebels out of desperation, but visionaries chasing wealth and influence. Anne Bonny, Mary Red, and Fanny Campbell weren't anomalies. They were symbols of possibility, living proof that society's rules were neither absolute nor permanent. You wander the ship, sensing the energy of crew interactions, some protective, some resentful, some downright hostile. You notice that alliances often formed around skill, courage, and necessity rather than gender alone. Still, being a woman imposed additional risks: suspicion, sexual danger, and scrutiny that could turn deadly at any moment. Yet the draw of freedom, of carving a life that belonged entirely to oneself, outweighed those risks. Oddly enough, some women pirates reportedly carried miniature personal compasses, charms, or even small flasks of water as private talismans, objects that helped them navigate the literal and figurative waters of pirate life. You imagine holding such a tiny object, feeling it warm in your hand, a private assurance against storms, betrayal, or capture. Scholars debate whether these practices were superstition, psychological comfort, or practical survival tools, but either way, they reveal a subtle layer of humanity beneath the rough and tumble exterior. You almost hear the creak of rigging and the faint splash of waves as these small comforts quietly anchored these women amidst chaos. The economic lure was undeniable too. The promise of plunder, shares of stolen treasure, and the ability to live on one's own terms motivated many to brave the unknown. Life at sea offered what the tightly controlled lives on shore never could: agency, mobility, and occasionally notoriety. You wander along the deck, imagining the quiet satisfaction of a successful raid, the shared laughter among a loyal crew, the thrill of challenging authority with a daring plan. These moments, brief but vivid, explain why women risked everything to taste the sea's forbidden freedoms. Scholars still debate whether such motivations were rare exceptions or part of a broader, underdocumented pattern of female maritime participation. By the time night falls, you feel the full weight of their choices. Freedom wasn't a gift, it was a gamble, high stakes and uncompromising. You imagine lying on deck under a star-strewn sky, feeling the gentle roll of the ship, the whisper of wind, and the quiet pulse of your own heartbeat, reflecting the courage it took to live beyond expectation. This tension between risk and reward, autonomy and danger, sets the stage for everything to come. Soon, you'll encounter storms, rival ships, and the inevitable threat of capture, the next chapter in this dangerous pursuit of liberty. And yet, even in this freedom, humanity remains. The letters, the charms, the quiet moments of connection. You sense that these women weren't merely chasing wealth. They were crafting identities, asserting presence, and daring the world to notice. You feel the ocean's vast expanse, a metaphor for both opportunity and peril, stretching endlessly in front of you. Scholars still argue over how many truly embrace this life for its promise versus its necessity, but you already sense that the draw of freedom, no matter the cost, was undeniable. Tonight, as the wind tugs at sails and the stars shimmer above, you step further into the psyche of women who chose the impossible. You can almost feel their pulse in your own veins. The thrill of independence, the taste of salt on skin, the anticipation of danger, and the deep, inescapable call of the sea. The next moments, the next choices, will define survival, and we're just getting started. You wake to the shrill cry of a gull slicing through the salt-tinged morning air, the timbers beneath your feet groaning with the ship's slow, relentless sway. Daily life aboard a pirate ship is less glamorous than tales suggest, yet intensely vivid. You grab a coil of rope to secure a sail, muscles straining as the wind tugs against your grip, and you realize that survival here depends on routine, resilience, and cunning. Female pirates experienced all of this acutely. They navigated not only the challenges of the sea, but also the scrutiny of their crew, whose trust had to be earned constantly. Scholars still argue whether female pirates were integrated fully as equals or tolerated only under the shadow of male approval, and you feel that tension as tangibly as the salt spray stinging your eyes. The deck is a constant orchestra of noise and activity. You hear the creak of rigging, the slap of waves against the hull, and the sharp commands of officers directing men and women alike. You bend over to scrub a stubborn stain on the deck, your hands raw from brine and friction, while others haul barrels of water or secure cannonballs. Some female pirates excelled in these tasks with surprising dexterity, quickly mastering skills that men had trained for years to perfect. You imagine balancing the delicate choreography of maintaining sails, navigating, and keeping watch, all while under suspicion simply because of your gender. It's exhausting and exhilarating simultaneously. Even mundane tasks have a layer of danger. While swabbing the deck, you glance toward the horizon, noting a suspicious sail that could belong to a naval ship or a rival pirate crew. One misstep in the shuffle of duties, and you might lose more than pride. You could lose your life. Yet, life aboard the ship also includes moments of subtle triumph. You may be fixing a net or stowing supplies, and a fellow crew member offers a nod of respect or a wry smile, small affirmations of earned inclusion. Oddly enough, some women developed secret signals or routines to communicate with trusted allies on deck, subtle gestures that avoided drawing attention while preserving cohesion and survival. Scholars debate whether these micro-strategies were intentional, widely taught, or emergent responses to constant danger, but you sense their ingenuity with every glance and nod. Meals are another exercise in adaptation. You imagine a small, cramped galley, or more often, nothing at all, where food consists of salted meat, hardtack, and whatever provisions remain unspoiled by the humidity or theft. Women on board had to navigate both scarcity and the subtle politics of sharing rations, especially when crew dynamics could shift violently at any moment. You can almost feel the grit of stale bread between your teeth, the faint tang of seaweed in the air, and the quiet satisfaction of snagging an extra portion without drawing ire. These small victories matter. They are survival, strategy, and subtle rebellion all at once. Rest is rare and unpredictable. Hammocks, when available, swing violently in the night, or you sleep on the cold wooden deck under the stars, each creak and splash threatening to awaken the entire crew. Yet, there's a strange intimacy in these shared vulnerabilities. Even rivals sometimes glance over a sleeping companion, aware that the day ahead demands cooperation. You notice, in a quiet moment, a female pirate tending a small collection of personal items, perhaps a keepsake, a charm, or a token of identity that offers comfort amidst the chaos. These small rituals provide psychological stability in a world where certainty is fleeting. Scholars still debate how much emotional resilience contributed to survival compared to brute strength, but it's clear both mattered. Training and skill acquisition are continuous. You watch as women practice swordplay, load pistols, and memorize navigation routes. Every task is both instruction and evaluation. Mistakes could be fatal, and proving competence is vital. The atmosphere blends camaraderie, tension, and subtle competition. Some pirates earned their place through sheer audacity, others through talent or ingenuity. And you notice the smallest oddities, like a woman using a mirrored piece of metal to observe the sky while keeping her hands free, or marking maps with secret notations only she could read. These clever improvisations illustrate adaptability, the essential tool for survival. Pirate codes, whether formal or informal, dictate interactions. You imagine a rough-hewn set of rules scribbled on a parchment or etched in memory: respect for skill, division of loot, loyalty under fire. Female pirates sometimes had to assert themselves twice as much to secure recognition, yet once earned, these rules often protected them as much as anyone else. Odd details emerge in the records. Women occasionally claimed larger shares of plunder for unique contributions, such as espionage, negotiation, or even subterfuge aboard rival ships. Scholars still argue whether such claims were exceptions or indicative of a broader, underrepresented pattern. You feel the thrill of power wrapped in a delicate balance of trust and audacity. Even leisure, when it happens, is punctuated by tension. Music, storytelling, or quiet conversation provides a temporary reprieve, yet everyone remains alert. You picture a female pirate spinning a yarn about a near escape, while others listen, fascinated and skeptical, weighing each word. These narratives often mix fact, exaggeration, and superstition, shaping reputations and legends while reinforcing camaraderie and survival instincts. Small rituals, games, or even tattoos signify identity, allegiance, and personal history. You notice, for instance, reports of women marking their victories or experiences in subtle ways, patterns on clothing or small hidden symbols. These were not merely vanity, they were storytelling and strategy intertwined. Navigating storms illustrates both literal and metaphorical turbulence. You grip the wheel during sudden squalls, salt stinging your eyes, as rigging screams overhead and waves batter the hull. Survival requires not just strength, but calculation, anticipation, and courage. You sense that female pirates often gained respect by navigating these crises with calm authority, subtly shifting perceptions of what they were capable of. Scholars still debate whether female leadership was tolerated or feared, but it's clear that acts of competence and bravery created undeniable social currency aboard pirate vessels. As the sun dips, casting long shadows over the rolling waves, you reflect on the strange intimacy of life at sea. You feel it, the constant oscillation between danger and discovery, the reliance on skill and intuition, the quiet triumphs hidden among grueling routines. You imagine the women folding personal items into small spaces, sharing a clandestine joke with a trusted crewmate, or mentally rehearsing strategies for an approaching ship. These moments, though fleeting, define the difference between survival and disappearance, between myth and history. By the end of the day, exhaustion blends with exhilaration. You lie on deck, eyes fixed on the stars, muscles aching, heart racing from exertion and anticipation. Every task completed, every risk navigated, every respect earned is a small victory in a life dictated by the sea. And you realize, as the wind whispers through rigging and the waves murmur their endless secrets, that daily life aboard a pirate ship is a crucible, forging identity, resilience, and occasionally, legend. You lean against the rail, feeling the salt spray mix with the sweat on your brow, and your mind turns to the women whose names echo through history: Anne Bonny, Mary Read, and Fanny Campbell, among others. These aren't just tales passed down in whispers. Their exploits were recorded, debated, and mythologized. You wander through the crowded decks of imagination, picturing Anne Bonny, fiery and cunning, concealing her identity while plotting raids with her lover and fellow pirate, Calico Jack. Scholars still argue whether her reputation as a fearsome pirate was amplified by male chroniclers or truly reflected her daring nature. Regardless, her legend persists, a beacon of audacity and defiance against societal norms. Mary Read comes into focus next, equally daring but different in style. She lived much of her pirate life disguised as a man, navigating the delicate balance between deception and leadership. You can almost see her moving confidently across the deck, interacting seamlessly with the crew while maintaining her secret. Oddly enough, some accounts suggest she had a fondness for gambling and card games, playing high stakes even amid the chaos of pirate life. Scholars still debate the reliability of these anecdotes. Were they factual or embellishments designed to make her story more sensational? Either way, the image of Mary Read is indelibly etched into the pirate mythos. Fanny Campbell, a less famous but equally intriguing figure, traveled incognito to join pirate crews in South America. You imagine her plotting her journey, evading suspicion, and adopting a new identity at every port. Her story highlights the lengths women went to gain access to the pirate world. Unlike Bonny or Read, Fanny's exploits are less about combat and more about clever navigation, subterfuge, and survival. This reveals a broader truth. Piracy wasn't solely about sword fights or plunder. Strategy, courage, and ingenuity were equally valued. You notice the pattern emerging. Each woman carved her own path, leveraging both daring and intellect. The mythology surrounding these figures often exaggerates violence and heroism, and you can feel the tension between fact and fiction as you walk the plank of history. Anne Bonny, for example, is portrayed in popular culture, swinging from ropes and issuing orders with sword in hand. In reality, records indicate she engaged in fights and contributed to raids, but not always in the cinematic, melodramatic ways we imagine. Oddly, some accounts suggest she was prone to sudden fits of rage, lashing out unpredictably, details that humanize her beyond the romanticized image of fearless rebellion. Scholars still argue whether such personal anecdotes were accurate observations or narrative flourishes meant to entertain and titillate readers. These women also navigated complex social dynamics aboard ships. You sense Mary Read forming quiet alliances with certain crewmates, earning respect through skill rather than intimidation. Anne Bonny, by contrast, relied on charm, wit, and audacity to secure her place and influence. Odd details emerge. Mary Read reportedly engaged in friendly duels with male crew members to prove her worth, while Anne Bonny sometimes disguised her identity not just from the outside world, but within her own crew, blending performance with strategy. You feel the layered subtlety. Female pirates had to negotiate authority constantly, both as individuals and as part of the collective. The legends don't stop at European pirates. You wander further into history and encounter women in the Caribbean, the Americas, and even parts of Asia who assumed command or fought alongside men. Some disguised themselves, some openly defied social expectations, and all faced the peril of capture. Scholars still debate whether these non-European figures were part of a broader trend of female maritime agency, or isolated anomalies remembered selectively by chroniclers. Yet each story adds texture, a reminder that piracy was an international phenomenon, shaped by risk, resourcefulness, and rebellion. Even the smallest quirks become notable. Anne Bonny reportedly carried a hidden dagger in her boot at all times, an unassuming weapon that could change the course of a confrontation. Mary Red, some sources claim, was unusually strong, able to handle tasks considered impossible for her peers. These tiny details matter. They reveal the interplay between ordinary survival, cunning, and the cultivation of fearsome reputations. You can almost feel the tension of crew members sizing up these women, uncertain whether to trust or challenge them, while they move with quiet confidence across the deck. These notable female pirate stories also highlight the precariousness of fame and survival. Many met untimely ends, others disappeared from records, leaving us to wonder about their fates. Oddly, some survived capture only to fade into obscurity, living quiet lives under new identities. Scholars still argue whether survival depended more on skill, luck, or social maneuvering, but the uncertainty adds to their mystique. You imagine the quiet, uneasy moments after a raid, breath held, eyes scanning the horizon, wondering who will live to tell the tale. In the mix of history and legend, you notice recurring patterns: daring, adaptability, disguise, and strategic alliances. These women mastered skills that were practical, psychological, and sometimes theatrical. And as you wander further into their world, you realize their significance isn't only in daring raids or clever escapes, it's in the challenge they posed to social norms. Oddly, their stories remain simultaneously celebrated and marginalized, a testament to both their impact and society's discomfort with female autonomy. Scholars continue to untangle myth from fact, creating an ever-evolving portrait of bravery and cunning. By the time the sun sets over the ocean in your imagination, you feel the pulse of history, hearts pounding as swords clash, minds racing with calculation, bodies straining under the constant demands of survival. These notable female pirates are more than names. They are living echoes of defiance, audacity, and the desire for freedom. You sense the world they challenged and the rules they broke, and the next steps in our journey will show just how brutally the outside world responded when these women were finally captured. You feel the tension crackle in the air as stories of violence ripple through pirate ports. Reputation aboard the seas is currency, and for female pirates, it carried a unique double edge. You wander through taverns and docks in your mind, hearing whispers of women who fought with ferocity, who led raids, who flouted the laws of both men and nations. Yet for every whispered legend, there's an equally brutal reality. Violence wasn't just spectacle, it was survival. Scholars still argue whether female pirates were genuinely more ruthless than their male counterparts, or if chroniclers exaggerated their aggression to scandalize readers. Either way, the fear they inspired became an essential tool. Some women earned reputations through cunning rather than sheer brutality. You imagine a female pirate quietly slipping aboard an enemy ship under the cover of darkness, dagger in hand, taking control before anyone realized what was happening. Oddly, some of these tactics relied on theatrics, like shouting commands in a deep, commanding voice to convince male crew members she was someone else entirely. Such psychological warfare often decided outcomes without a single sword drawn, a subtle but deadly form of violence. You sense the layers at play: courage, intelligence, and performative ferocity all intertwined. The myths surrounding their violence are colorful and sometimes absurd. Anne Bonny, for example, is portrayed as swinging wildly with pistols and cutlasses, defying odds in cinematic fashion. In reality, recorded accounts describe bursts of aggression, calculated strikes, and moments of fearlessness, less continuous action, more decisive interventions. Oddly, she reportedly once attacked a man who mocked her gender mid-battle, an incident highlighting how reputation and personal defiance intertwined. Scholars still debate whether these incidents were amplified for storytelling or genuinely representative of her personality. You can almost hear the clash of steel and the shouts of crewmen in the distance, feeling the electric intensity of momentary violence. Violence also shaped perception on a daily basis. You imagine navigating a tight ship's deck during a storm of arguments and skirmishes, where a sharp tongue could escalate into a fight. Female pirates had to negotiate both respect and fear constantly, often resorting to physical or psychological intimidation to secure their positions. Oddly, some women reportedly used small animals, like cats or monkeys, aboard ship to distract or unsettle opponents during fights. A quirky tactic blending cunning with theatrics. Scholars still argue whether such anecdotes reflect widespread practices or isolated eccentricities, but they illuminate the creative ways these women asserted dominance. Physical prowess mattered, but so did reputation. You feel the weight of expectation as female pirates entered new ports, their names whispered in taverns, rumors of previous exploits preceding them. Some sailors hesitated to cross them, fearing unpredictable violence. Others sought collaboration, hoping to gain from shared infamy. Oddly, even when reputations were inflated, the psychological advantage often translated into real-world benefits, shaping negotiations, alliances, and loot divisions. Scholars debate whether reputational exaggeration was intentional self-promotion or accidental myth-making by chroniclers, but the effect is undeniable. Violence at sea was rarely glamorous. Imagine the chaos of boarding a ship, gunpowder smoke, clouding vision, steel clashing against steel, the constant danger of falling overboard. Female pirates participated fully, wielding cutlasses, pistols, and brute determination. Oddly, some were known to conserve ammunition, aiming for intimidation over indiscriminate shooting, a small, pragmatic twist in the narrative of unrelenting aggression. You can almost smell the gunpowder, feel the sting of minor cuts, hear the sailors' cries of pain and victory, a symphony of controlled chaos where skill and reputation were inseparable. Reputation wasn't limited to acts of violence. You wander into whispers of cunning and deception, women who faked injuries to escape, feigned compliance to ambush enemies, or staged escapes that later became legendary anecdotes. Oddly, these stories often highlight not sheer brutality, but the ingenuity that created fear. Scholars still argue whether such tactics were deliberate performances or spontaneous improvisations, but they shaped perceptions, creating an aura that rivaled physical prowess. You sense the subtle interplay between myth and reality, as reputations influenced both survival and legacy. Violence also intersected with social expectations. You imagine the incredulous reactions of male counterparts, expecting women to be passive or incapable in battle. Every successful strike, every clever ruse, subtly subverted norms. Some female pirates reportedly laughed in the face of threats, using humor as both shield and weapon. Oddly, these instances of levity amid danger underscore how these women navigated social and physical landscapes simultaneously, manipulating perception to maintain authority. Scholars still debate whether humor and audacity were conscious strategies or natural personality traits, but they clearly played a role in survival. Beyond battles and skirmishes, the threat of punishment loomed large. Captured pirates faced interrogation, imprisonment, or execution. You feel the tension of knowing that every act of violence, every daring raid, could bring a sudden and brutal end. Oddly, some women used their fearsome reputations to negotiate more favorable treatment upon capture, leveraging myth against reality. Scholars continue to discuss whether these manipulations were effective or largely symbolic, but they illustrate how perception could rival swordplay in importance. By the end of the day, you sense that violence and reputation were entwined, a dual lifeline. Physical acts, cunning displays, and psychological maneuvers created a tapestry of fear and respect. Female pirates navigated this intricate web with skill, improvisation, and often audacious courage. Oddly, while myths celebrate constant combat, reality suggests that strategy, timing, and intellect were just as critical, if not more so, than raw aggression. Scholars still debate the balance, but you feel the pulse of history beneath your feet, the clash of ideals, expectations, and survival instincts shaping legend after legend. As night falls, you imagine the ship settling, the echoes of past skirmishes lingering like shadows across the deck. Reputation continues to hum in the air, a silent force governing alliances, enmities, and opportunity. You can almost sense the eyes of those who doubted these women, finally acknowledging that audacity, cunning, and well-timed violence were enough to make legends, even in a world designed to suppress them. The stage is set for the inevitable clash with law and authority that awaits these remarkable women, the next chapter in our tale. You feel a chill in the wind as the horizon darkens, not with clouds, but with the looming threat of naval ships. The ocean, once a playground of freedom, transforms into a stage of peril. Female pirates lived constantly on the knife's edge, and the knowledge that capture was never far behind shaped every decision. You wander along the creaking deck, imagining the tense calculations, which route to take, when to strike, when to hide. Scholars still argue whether women took more daring risks because of their precarious position, or if their choices mirrored those of male counterparts. But the looming presence of law enforcement was inescapable. Naval patrols were relentless. You hear the imagined boom of cannon fire in the distance, the shouted commands of officers intent on ending piracy, and the fear that every misstep could be fatal. Oddly, some women disguised as men reportedly took advantage of confusion during inspections, slipping past scrutiny with clever costumes, forged papers, or forged reputations. These small acts of subterfuge were survival tactics, blending ingenuity with audacity. You feel the tension as keenly as if a lookout's spyglass scanned the horizon, searching for approaching ships. The risk wasn't limited to open waters. Ports, taverns, and trading posts became hunting grounds where authorities, informants, and rival pirates could betray you. You sense the constant vigilance required, watching for unfamiliar faces, noting the demeanor of dockmasters, gauging which whispers might signal danger. Oddly, some female pirates maintained networks of sympathetic allies on shore, leveraging relationships to gain warning of impending raids. Scholars still debate the prevalence of such networks, but they demonstrate that survival required both cunning at sea and strategy on land. Every crew member knew the stakes. You imagine huddled conversations in dimly lit corners, discussing sightings of Navy vessels, plotting escape routes, and weighing the odds of continuing the hunt versus retreating. Female pirates faced unique vulnerabilities. Social expectations made them targets of suspicion or exploitation, and their capture could be both scandalous and sensationalized. Oddly, this notoriety sometimes worked in their favor, creating a paradox where fear and fascination offered a buffer against immediate danger. Scholars continue to argue whether these dynamics were intentional manipulations or coincidental outcomes, but the interplay is fascinating. Pirate ships weren't defenseless, but the balance of power was precarious. You picture a sudden encounter with a faster, better-armed man of war. Panic spreads briefly across the deck. Strategy becomes life or death. Female pirates sometimes took leadership roles in these moments, directing crew maneuvers or boarding strategies. Oddly, some accounts describe women using distraction techniques, throwing barrels overboard or faking a cannon malfunction to create openings. Scholars still debate whether these tactics were calculated or improvised, yet they highlight creativity as a critical survival skill. Fear of betrayal intensified the threat of capture. You wander through the imagined corridors of the ship's hold, thinking about the hidden conversations, whispered agreements, and occasional treachery among crew members. Some women navigated these internal hazards with shrewdness, securing loyalty through alliance, charm, or intimidation. Oddly, certain female pirates reportedly leveraged gossip to their advantage, manipulating perceptions to reduce suspicion and protect themselves. Scholars continue to explore the nuanced ways rumor and reputation influenced outcomes, showing that psychological skill could rival swordplay in importance. Storms, disease, and supply shortages compounded the ever-present threat of naval capture. You feel the subtle anxiety of rationing ammunition, checking weapons, and maintaining sails while constantly scanning the horizon. Oddly, some women developed keen instincts for reading both weather and human behavior, anticipating danger before it became imminent. Scholars still debate whether such skills were innate, learned, or the product of necessity, but they underscore the constant adaptation required at sea. The looming capture threat also shaped the moral calculus aboard pirate ships. Decisions about whether to attack, flee, or negotiate weren't just tactical. They were deeply strategic, often informed by knowledge that capture could mean torture, imprisonment, or death. You imagine the tense deliberations in the captain's cabin, the careful weighing of risk versus reward, and the subtle arguments asserting a woman's right to influence these choices. Oddly, some female pirates leveraged charm or perceived innocence to sway decisions, a tactic that blurred the line between manipulation and negotiation. Scholars still debate the ethics and effectiveness of these methods, but the outcomes were often decisive. You feel the palpable anxiety of approaching coastlines where Navy presence was strongest. Harbor towns could conceal informants, waiting for a slip in vigilance. Female pirates sometimes disguised themselves further, altering appearance, voice, or behavior to avoid recognition. Oddly, reports exist of women using coded signals or secret markings to communicate danger among allies, creating a hidden language of survival. Scholars argue whether these were widespread strategies or rare improvisations, but they add a layer of intrigue to the constant threat of capture. By the end of the day, you sense the omnipresence of danger shaping every decision. Every maneuver, every glance, every calculated risk is influenced by the knowledge that capture is not just probable, it is inevitable. Oddly, this constant awareness sharpened skills, honed judgment, and reinforced bonds among those daring enough to remain at sea. Scholars continue to explore the psychological impact of prolonged exposure to such threats, emphasizing the resilience required to survive in an environment where the law, rivals, and nature itself were relentless adversaries. As darkness falls, you feel the uneasy mix of exhilaration and dread. The next chapters will explore the reality of capture, trials, imprisonment, and consequences that force the romantic myths of female pirates to collide with harsh, bureaucratic reality. You can almost hear the distant creak of a gallows being constructed, the murmured warnings of dockside authorities, and the whispered stories of those who didn't survive to tell the tale. The sea offers freedom, but the world ashore offers no such mercy, and you sense that the real tests are only just beginning. You step onto the imagined dock, the salty breeze replaced by the stench of tar, sweat, and fear. Capture has finally arrived, and female pirates now face a stage far more terrifying than any battle at sea: the courtroom and the public square. You feel the weight of onlookers' eyes, the whispered judgments, and the inevitable mixture of curiosity and cruelty from those who delight in witnessing women defy, or fail to defy, their society. Scholars still argue whether public trials were primarily legal proceedings or theater meant to reinforce social order. But either way, spectacle and law are intertwined. You wander through the cobbled streets, imagining townspeople gathering to witness the trial. These events were as much about entertainment as justice. Women accused of piracy were judged not only for their crimes, but for their gender, attire, and perceived defiance of societal norms. Oddly, some female pirates attempted to manipulate public perception, dressing in ways that emphasized innocence or virtue while subtly signaling audacity. Scholars debate whether such strategies influenced verdicts, but they demonstrate the keen understanding women had of social optics, even under extreme duress. Inside the courtroom, tension crackles. You can almost hear the judge's gavel and the scribe's frantic notes. Legal proceedings are rigid and often confusing, heavily biased against the accused. You feel the anxiety and adrenaline as the accused women navigate unfamiliar laws, foreign languages, and procedural quirks. Oddly, some women used theatrics in their defense, bold gestures, piercing gazes, and eloquent speech to sway jurors and spectators alike. Scholars still argue whether these displays were effective or simply delayed the inevitable, but the drama highlights the intersection of performance and survival. The punishment, if deemed guilty, could range from imprisonment to execution, with little room for negotiation. You sense the looming shadow of the gallows or the cold walls of a prison cell. Oddly, some women managed temporary reprieves through bribery, alliances, or clever manipulation of sympathetic officials. Scholars debate how often such maneuvers succeeded, but the strategies reflect a remarkable adaptability. Female pirates had to combine courage, intelligence, and social savvy to survive both on the seas and in the courts. Public executions were grim spectacles. You can almost hear the crowd murmuring, the shuffling of feet, and the occasional gasp as condemned pirates were led to the scaffold. Female pirates were a particular curiosity, drawing attention both for their crimes and their gender. Oddly, some reportedly displayed defiance in their final moments, smirks, bold glances, or last words that challenged authority. Scholars continue to debate whether these gestures were genuine acts of courage or carefully constructed performances to maintain legend and dignity in death. You feel the tension between myth and brutal reality, the spectacle amplifying both fear and fascination. Imprisonment was harsh and dehumanizing. You wander through imagined cells, damp and cold, with minimal sustenance. Female pirates faced additional scrutiny. Guards and officials often harbored both disdain and morbid curiosity. Oddly, some women maintained secret routines, hidden letters, coded messages, or small acts of resistance, demonstrating resilience and cunning even when confined. Scholars still argue whether these acts were widespread or exceptional, but they reveal the constant negotiation between survival and subjugation that defined captured pirates' lives. Trials also carried long-term consequences beyond the immediate verdict. Reputation, social standing, and family ties could be irrevocably damaged. You sense the intricate web of fear, rumor, and scandal extending far beyond the courtroom. Oddly, some female pirates leveraged notoriety after release, finding that infamy could provide leverage in negotiations or inspire loyalty among crew members if they returned to sea. Scholars still debate the long-term effectiveness of such reputation management, but it highlights the nuanced ways women navigated both law and society. You notice the intersection of morality and law. Female pirates were judged not only for breaking maritime codes, but for transgressing gender norms. Oddly, contemporary pamphlets and ballads exaggerated female pirates' ferocity or promiscuity, feeding public curiosity and outrage. Scholars argue about the accuracy of these accounts, yet the distortions shaped both contemporary and modern perceptions. intertwining legend with lived reality. You sense how storytelling itself became a form of power and survival, influencing both public opinion and historical record. Even the most mundane details in trial proceedings carry weight. You imagine women meticulously noting every exchange, every judge's expression, every potential ally or adversary in the courtroom. Some reportedly memorized legal codes, anticipating cross-examination or procedural loopholes. Oddly, these small acts of preparation could mean the difference between execution and a temporary reprieve. Scholars still debate whether such foresight was common, but it reflects intelligence and discipline in an environment designed to intimidate and punish. By the end of the day, you feel the brutal reality. Capture meant exposure to judgment, humiliation, and often death. Yet, amid despair, ingenuity persisted. Female pirates combined courage, performance, and cunning to navigate trials, creating stories that blurred lines between reality and legend. Oddly, these trials sometimes elevated their status, immortalizing them in history in ways a quiet death at sea never could. Scholars continue to study these events, weighing the interplay of gender, law, and myth, but you feel the tension firsthand, the collision of audacity and authority shaping lives, legends, and legacies. As night falls over the imagined town, you sense the whispers of history lingering, the echo of footsteps in cobbled streets, the anticipation of grim consequences that await those who dared to defy society. You know that the next chapter, imprisonment, will reveal the harshest truths about what happens when rebellion meets bureaucracy and captivity. The ocean may have offered freedom, but now the walls of confinement close in. You find yourself in a cold, damp cell, the stench of mold and human misery pressing in from all sides. Imprisonment was rarely brief, and for female pirates, it carried unique hardships. You feel the weight of chains, the chill of stone under bare feet, and the relentless monotony of days stretching into weeks, months, or even years. Scholars still debate whether conditions for women were intentionally harsher due to perceived moral transgressions or simply reflective of general prison cruelty. Either way, confinement was a crucible for both body and mind. Daily routines are minimal but punishing. You imagine a tiny metal cup for gruel, scant water, and the echo of guards' boots pacing the corridors. Oddly, some women adapted with surprising ingenuity, using scraps of cloth to create bedding, memorizing routines for psychological control, or maintaining hidden objects, a charm, a letter, or a tiny mirror, to preserve identity and morale. These small comforts became lifelines. Scholars argue over how common such adaptations were, but each reflects the resilience required to endure the oppressive environment. Isolation is as much mental as physical. You feel the quiet stretching, like a vast ocean around you, interrupted only by distant clanging or muffled voices. Female pirates reportedly wrote coded letters to allies outside or even to fellow inmates, creating secret channels of communication. Oddly, these letters sometimes included maps, escape instructions, or simple words of encouragement, proving that ingenuity and defiance could survive even the most rigid confines. Scholars still debate whether these networks were coordinated or improvised, but the presence of such efforts highlights their resourcefulness. Disease and poor sanitation compound the misery. You imagine rats scuttling in corners, lice in hair, and the ever-present threat of dysentery. Women were particularly vulnerable, as authorities often neglected to provide separate facilities or adequate care. Oddly, some female prisoners reportedly developed makeshift medicines from herbs smuggled or gathered, demonstrating both practical knowledge and sheer determination. Scholars still discuss the extent of self-care practices in prisons, yet these anecdotes emphasize the intersection of survival and intellect. Interactions with guards are tense and complex. You feel the constant need to navigate power dynamics carefully. Oddly, Some women used charm, wit, or subtle manipulation to gain small favors, extra food, lighter labor, or brief moments outside. Scholars still argue about the effectiveness and morality of such tactics. But in an environment designed to strip autonomy, even minor victories were psychologically significant. The ability to maintain control over any aspect of life became a form of quiet rebellion. Punishment within prisons was often arbitrary and brutal. You sense the tension with every step as guards dole out lashes, confinement in smaller cells, or extended labor. Oddly, some women turned these punishments into tools, using them to build stories of endurance, bravery, and legend that would follow them beyond incarceration. Scholars debate whether this was conscious myth-making or survival instinct, but the psychological resilience required is undeniable. Even small moments of human connection mattered. You imagine secret smiles, whispered encouragements, or shared knowledge between inmates. Oddly, women reportedly taught one another skills like sewing, navigation basics, or even rudimentary self-defense, fostering micro-communities within the oppressive environment. Scholars argue that these small networks contributed to survival rates and mental fortitude, showing that camaraderie can flourish even under extreme adversity. The uncertainty of release or execution creates constant stress. You feel it, the mind racing to anticipate, to plan, to negotiate. Some female pirates attempted to bribe officials, appeal to influential allies, or exploit loopholes in legal systems. Oddly, a clever letter or a sympathetic official could postpone execution for weeks or months, offering opportunities for escape or negotiation. Scholars still examine the frequency and effectiveness of such maneuvers, but they underscore how intellect and cunning could influence fate even in captivity. Oddly, personal rituals often persisted. Women carried hidden charms, wrote secret journals, or quietly rehearsed speech or negotiation tactics. These acts maintained a sense of identity, a subtle assertion that the prison could not entirely erase who they were. Scholars continue to explore the psychological significance of such rituals, highlighting the human need for control and self-expression in environments designed to strip both away. By the end of the day, you feel the suffocating combination of monotony, danger, and uncertainty that defined imprisonment. Female pirates endured far more than the physical barriers. They navigated mental, social, and psychological challenges with ingenuity and resilience. Oddly, while the public often saw women's capture as the final defeat, imprisonment became a stage for survival, adaptation, and quiet defiance. Scholars continue to study these experiences, revealing the extraordinary strategies women employed to endure an unforgiving system. You lie on the cold floor in your imagination, feeling the weight of chains, the ache of hunger, and the pulse of tension. And yet, even in these moments, stories, memories, and legends persist. The human desire to survive, adapt, and leave a mark that defies circumstance. The next chapter will reveal how some navigated these extreme conditions and, for a few, even returned to the seas or left enduring legacies. The story of capture and survival is far from over. You sense the restless energy that bubbles within prison walls, the quiet hum of minds unwilling to surrender entirely. Escape is an obsession, a constant mental exercise. Female pirates, conditioned by years of danger and cunning at sea, often view confinement not as the end, but as a challenge to overcome. You imagine them pacing small cells, memorizing guard patterns, whispering plans to trusted allies. Scholars still debate whether escapes were primarily spontaneous acts of desperation or carefully calculated maneuvers, but you can feel the deliberate tension and strategy in every imagined step. Some escapes, rely on clever disguises. You picture a female pirate swapping clothes with a servant, or bending guards' expectations with bold postures and confident strides. Oddly, historical records note women using props, bundles of laundry, overturned barrels, or even forged documents to mislead officials. Scholars argue about the authenticity of these tales, but each reflects the fusion of ingenuity, courage, and performance required to navigate hostile territory. You feel the heartbeat of calculated risk, the thrill of potentially slipping past capture. Escape attempts often involve collaboration. You wander through imagined cells, hearing the soft exchange of plans, secret codes, and timing signals. Female pirates coordinated with fellow inmates or allies outside prison walls, leveraging networks built over years. Oddly, some women even recruited male prisoners to assist, exploiting both loyalty and fear to create openings. Scholars debate how organized these networks were, but the presence of coordinated effort highlights the social intelligence and negotiation skills essential for survival. Physical ingenuity plays a role too. You imagine a rope smuggled in, a hidden key, or a cleverly loosened bar providing a lifeline to freedom. Oddly, some women used daily routines and guard complacency to their advantage, turning monotony into opportunity. Scholars still discuss whether these techniques were learned from experience at sea or spontaneously devised under pressure, but either way, they showcase adaptability honed in the most extreme environments. Escape is rarely clean or guaranteed. You can almost feel the tension of moving silently through shadowed corridors, avoiding detection, and balancing the speed needed with caution. Oddly, some female pirates reportedly timed their movements to natural events, rainstorms, tides, or even the distraction of other prisoners, to maximize their chances. Scholars argue about the accuracy of these accounts, yet the creative use of environmental factors illustrates strategic thinking reminiscent of navigation at sea. The psychological stakes are immense. You sense the fear, the exhilaration, and the adrenaline coursing through those attempting flight. Oddly, some prisoners used bluffing as a tactic, pretending to comply, feigning illness, or creating distractions to buy critical seconds. Scholars continue to debate how often such tactics worked versus how often they failed. But the ingenuity and courage required are undeniable. Every small advantage, every calculated risk, can determine life or death. Even failed attempts reveal resilience. You picture guards discovering an escape plan, prisoners interrogated and punished, yet the women remain mentally defiant. Oddly, some female pirates used failure as a learning opportunity, observing weaknesses in security, memorizing routines, and preparing for a second attempt. Scholars still discuss how frequently repeated attempts succeeded, but the persistent drive to reclaim freedom speaks volumes about determination and audacity. Escape is rarely solo. Female pirates often relied on alliances forged at sea or in prison. You imagine subtle hand signals, shared knowledge of guard shifts, and coded messages carried by sympathetic allies. Oddly, some historical anecdotes describe prisoners exploiting rivalries among guards or leveraging favoritism to gain temporary leeway. Scholars argue over the prevalence of such strategies, but they reveal the ingenuity and psychological insight women used to navigate extreme danger. Once freedom is attained, the consequences are far from over. You feel the urgency of fleeing territory, finding trusted contacts, and planning the next move. Oddly, some escaped pirates immediately returned to the seas, resuming raids with renewed determination, while others sought new identities or relocated far from their former lives. Scholars still debate whether returning to piracy was common or exceptional, but it illustrates the indomitable spirit that fueled these women. You can almost imagine the exhilaration of a successful escape. Fresh air on your face, the distant noise of the city behind you, and the knowledge that cunning, patience, and courage combined to snatch liberty from the jaws of captivity. Oddly, these tales of daring flight often became the foundation for myth, elevating female pirates to legendary status despite their vulnerability. Scholars continue to analyze these stories, teasing apart reality, exaggeration, and narrative artistry. The thrill of escape cements the connection between audacity, intellect, and survival, highlighting the complexity of women's lives in the world of piracy. By the end of the imagined day, you sense a pattern. Escape is not merely physical, but psychological, social, and strategic. Female pirates navigate every facet of their environment with ingenuity, honed at sea and sharpened in captivity. Oddly, even when liberty is reclaimed, the scars of imprisonment linger, shaping legend and lived experience alike. The next chapter will explore the aftermath, how surviving capture, trials, and confinement shaped both history and personal legacy. You feel the oppressive weight of authority closing in again, this time in the form of formal punishments that reflect not just law, but gendered expectations. Female pirates rarely escaped scrutiny untouched. The consequences of capture were designed to reinforce social hierarchies as much as enforce justice. You imagine the meticulous records of courts detailing offenses, often highlighting appearance, demeanor, and perceived defiance as much as actual crimes. Scholars still argue whether the harshness was due to legal codes or the desire to publicly shame women who defied gender norms. The punishments themselves vary widely, from public humiliation to execution. You picture a small, cold cell where minor infractions result in extended confinement, manual labor, or deprivation of food and water. Oddly, some women reportedly endured these penalties with deliberate defiance, raising their heads, meeting the gaze of guards or fellow prisoners with audacity. Scholars continue to discuss whether these acts of courage influenced sentencing or merely enhanced their legend, but the psychological dimension of punishment is undeniable. Public shaming is particularly insidious. You can almost hear the murmurs of townspeople as women are paraded, their attire scrutinized, their reputations dissected. Oddly, some female pirates exploited this attention, using charm, wit, or subtle performance to turn public spectacle into a form of control, if only psychological. Scholars still debate how effective these tactics were in mitigating consequences, but they highlight the delicate interplay between perception and authority. Execution remains the ultimate consequence. You sense the chill of the scaffold, the anticipation of a crowd eager for spectacle, and the acute tension of the condemned standing in judgment. Oddly, female pirates often faced heightened fascination because of their gender. Authorities and spectators alike fixated on how a woman would face death. Scholars argue whether gendered spectacle increased or decreased the likelihood of mercy, but the pressure and stakes are clear. Even corporal punishments carry gendered undertones. You picture lashes, confinement, or physical labor meted out with a mixture of cruelty and moralized instruction. Oddly, some accounts suggest that women received harsher treatment for perceived insolence or audacity, not merely for criminal acts. Scholars continue to debate the extent of this bias, but it reflects broader societal anxieties about women who transgressed conventional roles. Beyond physical penalties, you feel the burden of reputational punishment. Lawsuits, confiscation of personal effects, and the threat of social ostracism create long-term consequences. Oddly, some women manipulated these restrictions, maintaining influence through correspondence, alliances, or leveraging fame to negotiate leniency. Scholars argue over the prevalence and effectiveness of such tactics, but they demonstrate the persistence of agency even in constrained circumstances. The psychological toll is immense. You imagine the quiet dread of waiting for judgment, the creeping despair of confinement, and the constant recalibration of strategy to survive. Oddly, some female pirates reportedly employed humor, defiance, or storytelling as coping mechanisms, preserving dignity and morale. Scholars still examine how mental resilience influenced outcomes, highlighting the intertwined nature of intellect, courage, and psychological fortitude. Gendered bias permeates every step of punishment. You feel the scrutiny of attire, manners, and even speech. Authorities often interpreted confidence or assertiveness as dangerous or immoral. Oddly, the very qualities that enabled survival at sea, courage, leadership, and cunning, could be weaponized against women in courts and prisons. Scholars argue that these biases shaped both the historical record and popular myth, inflating legend while masking true agency. Minor punishments often serve as rehearsal for larger consequences. You imagine the incremental escalation, small fines, temporary confinement, and labor, building toward harsher sanctions. Oddly, some women learn to exploit these gradations, using smaller punishments as cover to gather intelligence or prepare for eventual escape. Scholars still debate how widely these tactics were employed, but they reveal a sophisticated understanding of risk, timing, and manipulation. By the day's end, you feel the pervasive force of law intertwined with societal norms. Female pirates faced consequences not merely for crimes, but for challenging expectations, and each act of punishment became both obstacle and narrative. Oddly, these harsh measures sometimes immortalized women in legend, their defiance magnified by societal discomfort. Scholars continue to untangle myth from history, but you sense the essential truth. Survival required courage, cunning, and a constant negotiation of gendered perceptions. The night falls, leaving only the echoes of authority and the whispered tales of those who endured. You realize that punishment was not only a physical reality, but a social and psychological battlefield, shaping the lives and legends of women who dared to defy the ocean, the law, and society itself. The next chapter will reveal the subtle forms of resilience and adaptation that allowed some to navigate punishment and survive to tell their stories. You feel the tension ease slightly as your imagination shifts from punishment to the strategies women employed to survive it. Survival, after all, isn't just about avoiding the noose or enduring lashes. It's a continuous mental, social, and physical chess game. Female pirates developed methods as intricate and calculated as any naval maneuver, blending cunning, charisma, and sheer grit. Scholars still debate whether these strategies were instinctive or learned from experience at sea, but their ingenuity is undeniable. One critical tool is observation. You imagine a woman quietly studying guards' routines, noting shifts, habits, and weaknesses. Oddly, some reportedly memorized the layout of prison walls and surrounding streets, anticipating patrol patterns and potential escape routes. Scholars argue whether these practices were common or exceptional, but careful observation clearly offered practical advantages for survival, negotiation, and eventual escape. You sense the intensity of this quiet vigilance. Every glance and gesture becomes meaningful. Alliances also matter. Female pirates relied on camaraderie with other inmates, sometimes forming secret pacts to share information or resources. Oddly, some alliances even included sympathetic male prisoners or lower-ranking officials, revealing a nuanced understanding of power dynamics. Scholars still debate the prevalence and effectiveness of these alliances, but the strategic use of relationships highlights social intelligence as a vital survival skill. Psychological tactics are another cornerstone. You wander through imagined corridors, hearing whispered threats, playful misdirections, or clever bluffs designed to unsettle guards and fellow prisoners alike. Oddly, female pirates sometimes feigned illness, exaggerated weakness, or displayed calculated fear to manipulate perception, buying time or leniency. Scholars argue whether these were conscious strategies or instinctual acts, but the results were often striking, allowing women to maintain agency even under oppressive conditions. Resourcefulness extends to the mundane. You feel the creativity required to make limited rations last, construct makeshift bedding, or fashion tools for both survival and escape. Oddly, some women reportedly repurposed scraps of clothing, broken utensils, or discarded wood into functional items, demonstrating that innovation was as vital as courage. Scholars still debate the frequency of such improvisation, but it underscores the adaptability that defined these pirates' lives, both at sea and in confinement. Information is power. You can almost sense the quiet network of gossip, rumors, and coded messages passing through prison walls. Female pirates leverage this knowledge, sometimes learning about pending trials, shipments, or guard rotations. Oddly, some even intercepted correspondence to predict or influence outcomes. Scholars continue to examine the scope of these intelligence networks, highlighting the sophistication of women who used social insight as a tactical advantage. Mental resilience is crucial. You feel the emotional fortitude required to endure isolation, abuse, and uncertainty. Oddly, some women maintained routines, exercise, meditation, or memorized recitations to preserve sanity and focus. Scholars argue about the psychological techniques employed, but maintaining mental clarity clearly contributed to practical survival, decision-making, and the ability to exploit opportunities. You notice the interplay between courage and subtlety. Bold acts, challenging guards, negotiating privileges, or asserting authority were balanced with discretion, secrecy, and patience. Oddly, some female pirates reportedly masked audacity with humility or compliance, waiting for the perfect moment to act decisively. Scholars still debate the intentionality behind such behaviors, but the balance between action and subtlety is a recurring theme in historical accounts. Even legends of luck intersect with survival strategies. You imagine narrowly avoiding detection, slipping past patrols, or finding an unexpected ally. Oddly, historical anecdotes often describe a combination of skill and fortunate circumstance. Windy nights, distracted guards, or miscommunication that tipped outcomes. Scholars argue about whether luck was overemphasized, yet it remains a recurring element that shaped both survival and myth. By the end of the day, you sense that survival is not a single act, but a continuous performance, a delicate dance of observation, alliance, cunning, resilience, and timing. Female pirates who mastered these skills navigated punishment, imprisonment, and societal scrutiny with remarkable dexterity. Oddly, while history often emphasizes their crimes or daring escapes, the quiet brilliance of survival strategies often goes unnoticed. Scholars continue to explore these nuanced aspects, revealing that persistence, intelligence, and adaptability were as legendary as any sword fight or shipboard raid. You settle into the imagined night, sensing the quiet, calculated courage that allowed some women to endure extreme adversity. Their stories remind you that survival itself can be an act of rebellion, a demonstration of agency, and a foundation for the legends that persist across centuries. The next chapter will explore how, in some cases, survival transformed into reinvention, freedom, or enduring notoriety. You feel the first whispers of freedom, brushing against the harsh memory of captivity. Life after capture is rarely simple, but for some female pirates, survival translates into reinvention. You wander through imagined streets and coastal towns, sensing the cautious optimism of women who have endured imprisonment, trials, and the constant threat of death. Oddly, some return to piracy, using lessons learned to navigate the seas more cunningly, while others vanish into new identities, leaving their former lives behind. Scholars still debate how often each path was taken, but the transformative potential is clear. The reinvention often begins with reputation management. You imagine women crafting narratives, either exaggerating daring escapes or emphasizing coerced participation to soften public perception. Oddly, some engaged with publishers or chroniclers, knowing that stories of audacity could enhance future leverage or create a legend. Scholars argue whether this narrative shaping was deliberate or opportunistic, but its impact on historical memory is undeniable. Reputation becomes both shield and currency. Some women reintegrate into society cautiously. You can sense the careful balance of forging new alliances while avoiding scrutiny from authorities who might reopen old cases. Oddly, certain women reportedly leveraged maritime skills, navigation, trade, or seamanship, to earn legitimacy, quietly turning expertise into sustainable livelihoods. Scholars still debate the extent to which these practical skills facilitated reintegration versus continued involvement in illicit activity, but adaptability emerges as a consistent theme. A subset returns to piracy. You feel the thrill and risk intertwining as they step aboard familiar decks, this time wiser and more strategic. Oddly, prior capture often enhances status among crews, as legends of survival, cunning, or audacity become reputational currency. Scholars continue to discuss whether returning pirates operated more cautiously or with reckless boldness, but the psychology of regained freedom is fascinating. Survival breeds both caution and confidence. Social stigma remains a constant companion. You wander through imagined towns, sensing the curious, sometimes judgmental gazes of townsfolk. Oddly, some female pirates exploit notoriety to gain influence, intimidating rivals, attracting loyal crew members, or commanding respect in trading ports. Scholars argue about the balance between stigma and leverage, but these tactics highlight the ability to turn societal scrutiny into a tool for survival and authority. Personal reinvention often intersects with family and relationships. You imagine women navigating connections with relatives, spouses, or allies, carefully managing disclosure of their past lives. Oddly, some reportedly formed new familial or marital alliances that shielded them from retribution or allowed financial stability. Scholars still debate how widespread these protective measures were, yet they illustrate the blend of strategy, psychology, and necessity in post-capture life. Freedom allows for reflection and skill refinement. You can almost hear the quiet hum of thought, the internal assessment of past mistakes and victories. Oddly, some women wrote memoirs or confided tales of piracy, imprisonment, and escape, contributing to both personal catharsis and public fascination. Scholars debate the authenticity and embellishment of these narratives, but they provide invaluable insight into lived experience and the intersection of legend and reality. Reintegration is rarely linear. You feel the oscillation between fear of recapture and the lure of familiar seas. Oddly, female pirates reportedly relied on networks of trusted contacts, using intelligence gathered over years of experience to navigate legal, social, and maritime landscapes. Scholars continue to examine these networks, emphasizing how connections, reputation, and strategy underpinned survival and post-capture reinvention. Oddly, even those who abandoned piracy often remained linked to maritime communities. You imagine discreetly mentoring young sailors, sharing skills under the guise of trade or domestic activity. Scholars argue whether this mentorship preserved the legacy of piracy or simply facilitated economic survival, but it reflects the adaptability and resourcefulness of women shaped by extraordinary experiences. By the day's end, you sense that life after capture is a tapestry of survival, reinvention, and negotiation. Female pirates who endured punishment, imprisonment, and societal scrutiny transformed adversity into agency, navigating the intersection of law, society, and personal ambition. Oddly, these post-capture lives often blur the line between legend and reality, showing that survival was not merely returning from captivity, but mastering a world still predisposed to challenge, judge, and constrain them. You settle into the imagined night, sensing the quiet triumphs and subtle power moves that define life after capture. The next chapter will explore how myth, reputation, and history immortalized these women, blending fact and fiction in ways that continue to fascinate centuries later. You feel the electric pulse of story and legend weaving through the lives of these women as survival becomes intertwined with myth. Infamy is a currency, and female pirates spent decades navigating both the seas and the stories told about them. You imagine townsfolk whispering names, chroniclers exaggerating deeds, and ballads painting audacious exploits in golden hues. Oddly, some women actively encourage these tales, recognizing that fame, whether feared or admired, offered protection and power. Scholars still argue whether myth enhanced survival or simply distorted reality, but the effect is undeniable. Public fascination thrives on exaggeration. You wander through imagined taverns, where sailors trade stories of women who fought, escaped, or outwitted the law. Oddly, these accounts often emphasized gendered surprise, that a woman could match men in cunning or courage. Scholars debate the accuracy of such stories, but you sense their psychological impact, both a warning and a titillating spectacle, ensuring female pirates were remembered long after they disappeared from view. Legends often amplify the dramatic. You can almost hear the retelling of a pirate evading multiple ships or outsmarting a naval patrol with impossible ingenuity. Oddly, some women deliberately seeded such stories through confidants or allies, aware that reputation could manipulate authority or inspire fear in rivals. Scholars continue to investigate the degree of intentional myth-making, showing that narrative control itself was a survival strategy. Oddly, infamy could carry practical benefits. You sense female pirates using reputation to secure leniency, recruit crews, or negotiate trade deals. Even after leaving piracy, the aura of audacity and survival could shield them from scrutiny or elevate their social influence. Scholars argue whether this was opportunistic or calculated, but it reinforces the idea that stories are as potent as swords in shaping legacy. Cultural memory amplifies selective narratives. You wander through the imagined pages of pamphlets, ballads, and oral traditions, noticing the embellishments that persist. Duels at sea, daring escapes, and clever disguises. Oddly, women reportedly participated in shaping these narratives, hinting at audacious collaborations between life and legend. Scholars debate the interplay of fiction and fact, yet the persistence of these stories underscores their symbolic power. Scholars still argue whether female pirates were celebrated or vilified more in their own time. Oddly, the same qualities, audacity, independence, cunning, that ensured survival could be praised in some contexts and condemned in others. You feel the tension of navigating society while simultaneously controlling one's own legend, a delicate dance requiring insight, charisma, and timing. Oddly, some women leveraged infamy internationally. You imagine news of exploits traveling across ports and countries, creating both admiration and fear. Scholars debate whether global reputation affected local treatment or merely added to myth, but the ability to project influence far beyond immediate surroundings demonstrates extraordinary strategic awareness. Even ordinary acts could become legendary. You sense small, clever maneuvers, evading capture, securing supplies, or manipulating rivals, magnified into heroic feats. Oddly, these embellishments reinforce survival, as perceived invincibility could deter aggression from enemies or authority. Scholars argue whether myth served practical purposes, but it's clear that perception could be as decisive as action in shaping fate. Legends also influenced subsequent generations. You imagine young sailors, particularly women, inspired by stories of cunning, bravery, and survival. Oddly, these tales often blurred the line between reality and fantasy, providing templates for behavior, imagination, and aspiration. Scholars continue to explore the pedagogical role of pirate myths, noting how narrative shapes culture and perpetuates values over centuries. By the end of the day, you feel the intertwining of survival, history, and storytelling. Female pirates who endured capture, punishment, and imprisonment transformed personal experience into myth, crafting narratives that amplified both fear and admiration. Oddly, legend itself became a tool, shaping authority, influencing allies, and extending life beyond the limitations of the body. Scholars still debate the boundaries between fact and fiction, but you sense that the enduring power of these stories lies not in accuracy, but in the extraordinary human spirit they reveal. You settle into the imagined night, hearing the echoes of ballads and whispered tales, sensing how legend preserves courage, audacity, and resilience across centuries. The next chapter will explore the scholarly debates and historical mysteries that continue to surround these enigmatic women, blending fact, interpretation, and myth. You feel the weight of centuries pressing down, a mix of fact, legend, and speculation swirling in the historiography of female pirates. Scholars still argue endlessly over details: who truly commanded ships, who disguised themselves as men, and whose exploits were exaggerated by rumor or pamphlets. You imagine dusty archives, leather-bound court records, and yellowed letters, each one offering glimpses of a life that was daring, precarious, and sometimes outright contradictory. Oddly, even contradictory accounts contribute to the narrative, highlighting the fluidity of history as much as the rigidity of law. Evidence is scarce, and often mediated by bias. You wander through imagined records, noting how chroniclers frequently emphasized gender, moral transgression, or scandal over tactical genius or leadership skill. Oddly, some women actively shaped these records through correspondence, petitions, or allies, blurring lines between reality and presentation. Scholars debate how much intentional image crafting occurred, revealing that historical truth often exists alongside legend and manipulation. Scholars argue over the scale of female participation in piracy. You feel the tension in claims ranging from the notion of rare, exceptional women to the possibility of a more systematic presence. Oddly, some records suggest women were sometimes crew leaders or navigators, challenging assumptions about gendered roles at sea. Scholars continue to analyze the data, but the uncertainty itself demonstrates how historical gaps create space for both myth and insight. Disguise and identity remain central topics of debate. You imagine women cutting hair, donning men's clothing, or altering behavior to avoid detection. Oddly, scholars still argue about how often such strategies succeeded and whether they were temporary survival measures or deliberate career choices. The tension between fact and narrative complicates understanding, yet also highlights the remarkable audacity required to navigate such a hostile environment. Oddly, the sensationalism of piracy complicates scholarship. Tales of daring escapes, treasure hoards, or confrontations with naval ships dominate popular imagination, while daily life, discipline, labor, and hardship receives less attention. Scholars argue whether the sensationalized stories distort understanding or preserve essential truths about the culture and psychology of piracy. You feel the pulse of human fascination with extremes, where exaggeration coexists with lived experience. The role of collaboration and alliances is hotly debated. You wander through imagined councils and whispered agreements, sensing female pirates negotiating, scheming, and manipulating both male and female counterparts. Oddly, some scholars posit that these alliances were as critical to survival as combat skills, a nuance often overlooked in favor of romanticized solo exploits. The combination of intellect, strategy, and social acumen emerges as a recurring theme in surviving both the sea and society. Historians also wrestle with the intersection of law, gender, and punishment. You imagine courts and gallows, biased legal frameworks, and societal expectations creating a uniquely dangerous environment for women. Oddly, debates continue over whether harsher treatment reflected actual threat, moral policing, or theatrical spectacle. Scholars scrutinize these contexts to understand both social structures and the lived experience of captured pirates. Cultural memory shapes interpretations. You feel the influence of ballads, pamphlets, and oral storytelling, which amplify daring exploits while minimizing mundane struggles. Oddly, some historians suggest that exaggeration served practical purposes: intimidation, negotiation leverage, or reputation building. Scholars debate where legend ends and fact begins, but you sense that the interplay itself offers insight into the mindset, strategy, and adaptability of these women. Even treasure tales remain contested. You imagine maps, rumored gold, and sunken ships, symbols of wealth, freedom, and risk. Oddly, some scholars argue these stories were moralizing tales or economic fantasies, while others insist they reflect authentic maritime practices. The ambiguity underscores a central tension. The line between myth and material reality is often as fluid as the sea these women sailed. By the day's end, you sense that scholarly debates and historical mysteries form a web as complex as any pirate network. Female pirates remain enigmatic, their lives reconstructed from fragmentary records, embellished tales, and surviving legends. Oddly, the uncertainty itself magnifies fascination, showing that history is not merely a list of events, but a living dialogue between evidence, interpretation, and imagination. You settle into the imagined night, feeling the hum of unanswered questions and the thrill of historical detective work. The next and final section will explore the ultimate legacy, how these women's lives, legends, and lessons echo into the modern imagination, bridging centuries and captivating our fascination. You feel the pull of time, centuries stretching between the era of the female pirate and your present awareness. Legacy is more than survival. It's the way stories, myths, and lived experiences ripple into culture, imagination, and modern consciousness. You imagine novels, movies, and documentaries, each borrowing from historical fragments and folklore, embellishing courage, cunning, and audacity. Oddly, some women who were once vilified or punished now inspire admiration, a testament to the enduring power of narrative. Scholars still debate how much of this legacy reflects reality versus myth, but its impact is undeniable. You wander through imagined libraries and film sets, sensing how modern audiences are drawn to rebellion and resilience. Oddly, contemporary depictions often highlight independence, strategic brilliance, and moral complexity rather than mere lawbreaking. Scholars argue whether these portrayals obscure historical realities, yet the fascination speaks to universal themes: courage, defiance, and human ingenuity. You feel the connection between past audacity and present admiration, a bridge linking centuries through story and imagination. Oddly, the gendered aspect of their legacy persists. Women who defied norms centuries ago now resonate as symbols of empowerment. You imagine young readers and viewers recognizing in these figures the possibility of agency, skill, and independence in a world that often underestimates them. Scholars debate whether this contemporary lens distorts history, but the resonance is undeniable. These pirates' lives provide templates for courage and self-determination across time. Legends inspire both scholarship and popular imagination. You sense a spectrum. Some researchers painstakingly reconstruct events from sparse records, while storytellers embellish daring exploits for dramatic effect. Oddly, both serve a purpose. One preserves nuance, the other amplifies fascination. Scholars still discuss the interplay between rigorous history and narrative myth, but you can feel how both contribute to a dynamic, living memory. Even mundane acts from their lives become part of legacy. You imagine hidden letters, strategic alliances, and survival strategies magnified into lessons of adaptability, intelligence, and resilience. Oddly, small details, like a clever escape or a subtle negotiation, often inspire more admiration than grand battles, showing that legacy is sometimes built on subtle genius rather than overt spectacle. Scholars debate the relative weight of myth versus practical accomplishment, but both influence how history remembers these women. The storytelling persists across cultures. You feel the global fascination with piracy, adventure, and defiance of authority. Oddly, female pirates appear in folklore, cinema, and literature worldwide, their narratives adapted, reinterpreted, and celebrated in contexts far removed from the Caribbean or European seas. Scholars continue to explore cross-cultural resonance, emphasizing how themes of autonomy and rebellion transcend geography and time. Oddly, the most enduring aspect of their legacy is psychological and symbolic. You sense how stories of survival, cunning, and audacity challenge assumptions about gender, power, and human potential. Scholars argue about the historical accuracy, but you feel that the symbolic lessons, the courage to defy expectation, the intelligence to navigate danger, the resilience to endure, are timeless. These traits resonate because they reflect universal human struggles, making the pirate's legacy perpetually relevant. By the day's end, you realize that the stories of female pirates after capture are about far more than crime or punishment. They are chronicles of survival, adaptation, and the indomitable human spirit. Oddly, the myths that endure often capture deeper truths about ingenuity, courage, and audacity, bridging centuries of human experience. Scholars, storytellers, and audiences continue to debate, reinterpret, and celebrate these lives, ensuring that even centuries later, the echoes of their adventures remain vivid and compelling. You feel the gentle hum of history fading into imagination, the stories settling like soft waves against memory. Oddly, in the quiet reflection, you sense the continuity of human resilience, how daring, clever, and defiant individuals shape not only their own destinies, but the stories that inspire generations. As the night draws on, you feel yourself sinking into the gentle cadence of reflection. Imagine the ocean waves lapping softly against a wooden hull, the rhythmic creak of ropes and sails, and the distant call of seabirds under a star-studded sky. The adventures, the capture, the cunning, and the audacity of these women begin to blur into a calm tapestry of resilience and legend. Oddly, even the harshest punishments and the most harrowing trials transform into whispers of courage that echo through time. You let your mind wander through dimly lit cells, shadowed courts, and secret meetings, sensing the subtle brilliance of strategies, alliances, and quiet defiance. Oddly, the lessons of observation, ingenuity, and perseverance feel intimate, like soft currents beneath the roar of history. Scholars may debate facts, but the emotional truths, the suspense, the thrill, and the human resilience remain universally compelling. Picture the transformation from fear to freedom, from survival to legacy. Oddly, in their stories, you see more than piracy. You witness the tenacity of spirit, the audacity to challenge norms, and the quiet power of intelligence and strategy. The echoes of these lives ripple forward, inspiring courage in ways both subtle and profound, reminding you that even in confinement or adversity, ingenuity and resolve can shape destinies. Now, as you settle further into this imagined night, dim the lights a little more, feel the soft hum of the fan or the gentle whisper of a breeze. Let the tales of defiance, audacity, and survival soothe your mind, carrying you towards sleep with soft echoes of history's lessons. Oddly, the pirate's spirits linger in the quiet, daring you to remember that courage and cunning can survive even the harshest tides. Sweet dreams.